During the time of the pharaohs, the city of Karnak was a shining example of civilization that all other nations could only hope to emulate. Today, Karnak lives on, surrounded by the spirits of the past. However, something has gone terribly wrong. Unknown forces have seized the city, and great turmoil is spreading into neighboring lands. World leaders from all parts of the globe have sent forces into the Karnak Valley, but none have returned. The great power of this new empire is quickly crushing the best forces the human world has to offer. The only known information about this crisis came from a Karnak villager found wandering through the desert miles from his home, dazed, dehydrated, and close to death. In his final moments among the living, the villager told horrifying stories of fierce alien creatures that invaded the city, devoured the women and children, and made slaves of the men. Many of the unfortunate victims were skinned alive or brutally dismembered. Others were subjected to unbearable tortures, injected with strange substances, and then mummified while still alive. According to the villager, even the mummified body of the great King Ramses was unearthed and taken away. You have been chosen from a group of the best operatives in the world to infiltrate Karnak and destroy the threatening forces. But as your helicopter nears the Karnak Valley, it is shot down. You barely escape with your life. With no possible contact to the outside world, you begin your adventure, ready to accomplish your mission, praying to return alive.
Welcome back to another Gaming Memories video. Here we are taking a look at a game that is quite possibly and one of my all-time favourite games on the PlayStation, and that is Exhumed. It was also known as Powerslave outside of Europe. Essentially it was the same game, but it was just given a different name depending on the region it was in. But it still didn't change the fact that this game is just awesome. This is actually a first-person game, first-person shooter slash survival horror type game, even action-based game that was released in 1996 on the PlayStation. And this game here is without a doubt one of my favourite games of all time. It's one of the best FPS games on the PlayStation, if not ever created. And for its time, it actually was pretty much ahead of its time in terms of not only storytelling but gameplay style, graphics, action, and how you interact with environments. And it was also one of the best looking FPS games, if not one of the best looking games on the PlayStation at the time it was released. This is actually a hidden gem in my opinion in games in general, not just the PlayStation but overall. There was multiple versions of this game that were released both on the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn and the PC respectively, but the PC version had got a completely different style of game altogether. The game was built using an engine called the Build Engine that was used to make a lot of different types of games on likes of the PC, like Duke Nukem and even Doom and so forth back in the day. But the PC version used the Build Engine to literally create the content for its game, whereas the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn used a completely different engine to create their version of the game. And if you've ever played the PC version and you go on to the console versions, you will see a distinct difference because the level design and layout is totally different. Even interactivity with a lot of the features is totally different between the consoles. The PC version is definitely a harder game, and there's a lot more elements to it, but to be honest, actually the console versions actually look better, so they do. Graphically they actually look far superior in my opinion. Definitely the PlayStation version definitely does anyway, and this was the game that I was introduced to. Now I remember going back to my first experience of this. I remember actually it was my mate Derek. He had originally gotten his PlayStation. He'd actually bought a second hand from a guy that actually lived not too far away from where we lived, and he got a couple of demos with the PlayStation that he bought, and in one of the demos there was a couple of games on it, and there was 2 first-person shooter games. One was called Disruptor and the other one was Exhumed. I have actually done another video on Disruptor. I'll leave a link in the description so you can go check that out. That again also is another excellent FPS game, and definitely one of the best FPS titles on the PlayStation 1, so I highly recommend check that out as well. Again, I'll leave the link in the description, so definitely go and have a look at it if these are the type of games that you're into. So we got to play the demos of these games here, and even though Disruptor is more sci-fi based, this is definitely a very different style of game. It's based, like say, within Egypt, but its concept is based around like an alien invasion, and it's up to you as like kind of like a lone warrior or soldier to literally claim back whatever to try and save the world. Now the concept of the game is actually really good. Like the graphic design, the stories, the elements of the level design, interactions, and even the weapons are excellent in this game. In a lot of ways it was actually ahead of its time. The developers now that created this game, they no longer exist. The company doesn't exist anymore, but they were able to create elements in this game that was beyond anything that were really were ever seen at that point in games, and a lot of what stuff that's in this game actually revolutionised the way games are pretty much portrayed today. That's why this game is considered, like Doom, to be considered a classic, even though this game never got the recommended heights that Doom actually got. As Doom is probably the most recognised FPS franchise ever in history, but this game here on its own right was equally as good. It had a lot of features in it that Doom didn't have. A lot of more interactive kind of elements. You could like even find hidden areas where you could collect items that gave you different abilities, and you could clearly see when you destroyed certain parts of the environment to find those secrets as well. Plus the choice of weapons in it were awesome too. You had a really cool selection of unique and quirky type weapons, and just the overall physics and the mechanics of the game were actually really, really good. It was very, very fluid. It never really suffered, if at all, from any sort of like lag or slowdown during the course of the game, and it was excellent. I always highly recommend this game every time I play it. Like I remember even from the first time I did play it, same playing that demo, and then about a month or two later Derek actually got this game, and he also bought NBA Jam Extreme, which is also another awesome kind of sports title. So watch it, I'll be doing a video on that soon as well, so keep an eye out for that one. And it's an excellent title as well. But this here, and we were playing between the two of them, but I was actually obsessed with this game here. And the cool concept about this that was kind of unheard of at the time was the fact is that you could revisit levels that you had actually been to. The levels are actually designed in a way that when you first play it, there's certain access points that you actually cannot get to through your standard means. You actually have to wait until you upgrade your character and get different abilities and elements, even different types of weapons, before you can actually access other specific areas within the levels. And this here particular level in Karnak is one of those particular kind of junction points in the game where it can, depending on which avenue you take, will lead you on to a different area or a different set of levels. So again, you have to complete different tasks, find different items, complete different objectives. So it was very unique, and there was so much replayability in the game. And that's what was the cool thing about this, because I remember myself and my mate Derek, we were flat out actually literally playing this game, trying to find everything in it and trying to figure out where to go next. And a lot of the stuff in the game was definitely not as evident straight off to kind of have an idea of what exactly to do, but the more you played it, it definitely started to make a lot of sense. But at the same time, it offered enough of a challenge, because this game was tough, really enjoyable, but very tough as well. Because this was a typical example of an old school classic FPS game. You could get so far, you could only save at the start of or at the end of every level. The problem with it is if you died or made any sort of fatal mistake throughout the course of the level, that was you done. You'd either have to reload the game or literally start the level from scratch. There was zero room for error. There is certain levels in the game that will actually definitely test your patience, because there's a lot of jumping sections and you have to time your jumps and you have to make sure that you get everything spot on. If you don't actually make the jump, your whole level progress is screwed, so you literally have to go through the whole process again and again. But that's what made these games kind of unique, because they offered that challenge. Yes, they were a bit repetitive in terms of that kind of element to it, but that's what made you practice them. That's what gave you that challenge, and that's what made you so good at these games, because you were enjoying the experience that much that there was no way that you were going to let this game defeat you. You would actually keep playing it until you got past that level. Even if it took you 100 tries to get past it, you would keep playing it until you got it, and that's usually what happened. Like, this here is definitely for me one of the all-time greats on the PlayStation, if on any console, period. I just absolutely love this game. It's one of my favourites. It'd definitely be one. Like, I've played a lot of FPS games, but I'll be honest, this year's actually, if I have like say a top 10 or even a top 5, this is in the top 5 easily, hands down. So it is, and I know it's an older game, but this game just offered so much and it was so unique for its time, and it's a cool kind of aesthetic and it's got a cool vibe to it. Plus it's also got a really, really cool kind of unique soundtrack that's really unique to the game itself, and it really gets you kind of pumped up in different levels as well. The soundtrack really suits different environments that you're in, and it really kind of adds to the overall feel to the game. Like, the level design is really, really good. How you interact with enemies, weapons, it adds enough difficulty and a challenge for you to really get the most out of it. And the game's long enough for you to actually want to replay it, to get everything in the game. This game really is just, I just awesome. Now, I know maybe people out there that may not probably agree with me, but I'd imagine if you're into FPS games, you will have probably experienced this if you played games on the PlayStation. This is, without a doubt, one of the best games on the system, hands down. And unfortunately, it wasn't as well recognised. It did get really good, like decent reviews, but it wasn't as well praised, and it didn't get the same kind of limelight or appeal or attention that, say, games like Doom and other games on the system would have gotten, which is a pity, because this here, hands down, is as good, if not better, than most of them. It just never got the recognition, but it is but it's still even highly regarded, even likes of going back to likes of gaming history and stuff like that. It is highly regarded still as one of the best games of its time, which it actually is, and I totally agree with that 100%, because this game is a fantastic game. And again, like I stress, if you have not played this game, or if you're into FPS games, you need to experience this game. This game is fantastic. Yes, it can be annoying, yes, it can be repetitive, and it is tough as nails at times, but if you really want to see how games have evolved over time and see elements of what was possible on the PlayStation back in those early days, this here game proves that, because it offered so much, and it offered way more in terms of elements that for its time was actually very unique. That it was actually kind of way ahead of its time, to be totally honest. And you can definitely see that, especially now in modern games. A lot of what was done in this game, you can clearly see a lot of similar kind of facts and elements portrayed now in modern games. So I definitely agree that a lot of it came from like these type of era of titles, and this here definitely been one of the best ones. Now, I actually played the PC version, and it is a lot harder. There's actually just as little room for error. The levels are a lot longer, and it is harder to really kind of know what to do. But you don't have access to the likes of, in this here you pick up orbs, so the blue orbs give you ammo, the pink orbs give you health. It's different on the PC version. PC version, you have to, for your physical weapons like your machine guns and pistols and whatever, you actually have to collect physical ammo, and then you have to collect like vials, like blood vials or like drinks and stuff like that to give you health back, so it has a different kind of concept. But again, it was built on a completely different engine, so it used a different kind of elements to portray the gameplay. But that's not to say it's a bad game, it's actually an excellent game as well. But I'll be honest, this is my favourite version of the game right here, and I think a lot of people that are familiar with Exhumed would recognise this here as probably being the better version. Now you can quote me on that, everybody's different or entitled their opinion, but this is the one I would have actually played the most and the one I enjoyed the most. This is a fantastic game, and I highly recommend that if you haven't played this game, you have to play it. If you're into your old school FPS shooters, and if you have not played this, you definitely need to experience this, because this really is an awesome game. Because it offers pretty much everything that you want from an FPS shooter. It has the atmosphere, it has the combat, the level design, the soundtrack, it has it all, and it all fits in really, really well. This is an awesome title. So I definitely recommend go and experience it and enjoy it, for sure. So what are your thoughts of Exhumed? Did you actually manage to play it back in the day? And if so, what are your thoughts of it? Be sure to share it down in the comments below, as I'd love to hear your experiences of the game. So if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, also subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to be updated whenever I release future videos, as I will be creating more videos around playing classic games and reliving old memories with games like this here, even getting to play other games I never got to play back in the day on the PlayStation, and sharing my views and thoughts on those games as well with all of you. Plus it also helps to increase engagement with the channel and helps me with creating more videos. So until next time, keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and make sure to keep those gaming memories alive.
Woo!